What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JAR. JAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. And we're here this week for another Aether Revolt story. We are here for Skies over Ghirapur. It could not have been easy following Burn. This is the story following Burn. If you were following along in the stories, if you watched our previous video, which I'll link at the top over there, you guys can go check that out, where we gushed over Burn. Spoilers, I guess. This is Skies over Ghirapur. Our quick review in the beginning.
I guess worth reading if you don't have something important to do.
It's
nice. I like it.
It was an okay story. It tied together certain things. If you want to know the fate of Sky Sovereign, which was a very impactful card within Kaladesh, then you'll want to read the story. If you want to know about another new card from Aether Revolt, or another new character from Aether Revolt who has a card, Kari Zev, you can go read the story and you'll learn about them as well. Also, if for whatever reason you were questioning, like I was, if you were questioning where Jace was during the fight at the Aether Hub, you'll get that question answered as well.
There you go.
So, for those reasons, if you want those questions answered...
Why, I still can't tell you, but...
Why he was there?
Yeah.
I mean, they gave him enough to do. It's not like he didn't have enough to do.
They made it seem like he really knew Kari and...
Anyway, so the short review is, for those reasons, I would recommend going to read it, but it is definitely not one that you should go out of your way to read. If you have not done so yet, go read Burn instead.
Yeah.
Onto the full review itself. Skies over Ghirapur. We got to meet Kari Zev. We got to meet Ragavan, which was cool.
Yes.
That was a nice moment.
Those were both cool characters, but definitely the monkey.
Ragavan. We also got to see Dipala again, which was kind of cool. The pilot exemplar. We saw her from Kaladesh, and we saw her in a couple of Kaladesh stories as well, not just as a card.
Yeah, she keeps popping in.
Which is something that I can take away from this story, good or bad. What I can take away from this story is that they are really doing a great job in this whole block of stories of introducing you to characters and then having them be cards as well, or vice versa, having them be cards and then introducing you to them, because that was something that they didn't necessarily do well in the past, where you would have characters that were super impactful in the stories and they didn't get their own cards, and that was a little disappointing because it's supposed to be kind of that symbiotic medium where one helps the other, and you have these cool characters. For example, Hal and Elena within the Shadows over Innistrad story, they didn't have a card, and that was something that was mentioned, I believe, by Mark Rosewater. I don't want to put words in his mouth. I believe it was him, but I could be wrong, where it was mentioned that, you know, these characters are characters that people or Magic players really latch onto and appreciate as characters, and they want to see them as cards, and yet because the story team writes the stories after the cards have already been made or after the set has already been finalized, you know, it seemed like, at least with Shadows over Innistrad, the story was done well after the set had already been completed, and they were presumably moving on to Kaladesh, Aether Revolt, Amonkhet, etc.
Right, but I think now they've kind of gotten to a point where they're a little bit better at making things coexist.
Yes, seemingly. Yeah.
They just needed time to get to that point because they haven't been doing this putting stories up online thing for that long. Right.
And that's where you get characters like Gisa and Geralf, which we've talked about many, many times in the past. I'm not even going to link something at the top. If you haven't watched a lot of JAR, you can probably find us talking about them in a lot.
So Hal and Elena might end up being like Gisa and Geralf, where people fall in love with them early on in a different set than they actually appear in.
Yes.
And they only appear in that set because people fell in love with the characters.
Correct. But what I like now is that they're not even giving you a chance to decide whether you like them or whether you don't. They're just putting them in. So we saw that with Sram from the 2 stories ago, which was still in the last video. We talked about him when we were introduced to him. He was a kind of a one-off character. Maybe we'll see him again. I don't really know offhand, but he seemed to be a one-off character, and yet he has a card. And in fact, I think he has 2 cards. He has his own actual card, and then a card talking about like one of his abilities or his expertise or something like that. Yahenni, same thing. We saw Yahenni in Kaladesh, and now Yahenni has an actual card in Aether Revolt, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Because they totally deserve it.
It's a great card.
Yeah.
The art is great. I don't know what the card does mechanically.
The abilities are really cool as well, just from what I've seen. We're not doing a review of that here, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, but we'll talk about it more at the end, but pre-release is tomorrow as of when you're watching this, if you watch it on release day, so come on back to the channel and you'll see us open stuff. Maybe we'll get Yahenni, who knows?
Yes, hopefully.
That's really neither here nor there. In terms of...
Yahenni is one of my faves.
Yahenni's really awesome. Like, the story team did a great job with them. And it's just... It was great. But this story, again, seeing Kari Zev, sorry, wanted to just make sure I got it right. Seeing Kari Zev was cool, seeing Ragavan was cooler, because it just seemed like it would be some fun, and it really was, but I think this story had a lot working against it, and so showing off this cool new character, these 2 cool new characters, and showing us T'Pala again, and showing us Jace, it kind of, in my opinion, didn't really do enough to save the story.
Yeah. Like, maybe they should have put this one first before Burn.
I absolutely thought of that. Now, the problem with that technically is, in this story, T'Pala and some of the other, I wrote it down, Derby Crows, that was the name of that group that T'Pala was with when Kari Zev and Jace come to talk to them. She and some of the Derby Crows were with Pia and her renegades when they lost the Aether Hub, so they had kind of that information which occurred in Burn, but I don't think that it would have been too difficult to have shown this story first, and then after that to have had Burn and to say, like, you know, and now here you know that the Aether Hub has been lost.
Right.
Here's how you know that the Aether Hub has been lost.
Here's a flashback, you know, that shows that occurring.
Right, because you didn't, besides T'Pala, who I don't know that she was mentioned by name in Burn. I could have forgotten because it was such a long story, but I don't believe that that was the case. And it was just such a long story that it's possible that she was mentioned. But regardless, it wouldn't have mattered. I think, based on the caliber of the stories put against one another, that would have been fine. Plus the fact that it would have given them, the story team, an opportunity to break up the introduction of the Story Spotlight cards, because we had Story Spotlight 2 and 3 shown on the Monday release and the Wednesday release, and then you have this one where none were shown, which is fine. I'm not saying that I needed one here, but I think it would have been better if you're gonna have one that doesn't have a Story Spotlight in it, have it be the one that separates. I just think that would have made a little bit more sense. Again, plus the fact that this story kind of wasn't up to snuff in comparison with Burn.
Right.
It also, don't get me wrong, I also don't necessarily think it was up to snuff in comparison to some of the other ones either, but like I said...
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I wasn't as hard on it as you. I think you just had Burn left over in your head and you just had really high expectations.
Well, so let's talk about one of my biggest problems with this story. And as the person who is reading the story, as opposed to Amy who is listening to it, at least based on the way that we do it, one of my biggest problems with this story is actually something that the Magic story has not had a problem with for some time. It was something that existed for a while, and it was noticeable in its existence, but it went away for a while to the point where I had forgotten that it was a problem in the first place, and then this brought it back up to me.
Yeah.
There were a lot, and I mean a lot, of spelling and grammatical errors in this story. Now, I'm not trying to be a typical internet commenter where I'm like, it's there, not there, and you're spelling it out. That's not what I'm saying.
No,
but when you're
bad.
well, because spelling errors is one thing. A spelling error here or there, if I understand what the word is, not that big of a deal. If I have to stop in my flow of reading your story and try to go back and figure out what you were actually trying to say, that takes me out of that experience. Correct, and that's unfortunate.
Like, there were, I don't know, there was definitely one sentence that was just... I still don't know what they were trying to say.
It was difficult, literally difficult to discern what it was. Now, as I was reading it, I was attempting to just correct the errors as I was reading it out loud, so Amy didn't even hear all of the grammatical errors or see the spelling mistakes. And again, I can forgive the spelling mistakes if I know what you're getting at. If I have to correct your story but it's obvious enough, I can still overlook it. But if there's genuinely a situation where I don't understand exactly what you were saying, that's rough. And it's again, just unfortunate.
It's a disservice to the people reading, but it's also a disservice to the writer, because the ideas aren't being conveyed.
Yeah, your story doesn't get to shine through.
Yeah, and that's, that just defeats the purpose.
Yeah, and we have no idea. We don't know, and maybe you guys do, I doubt it, no offense to anyone out there, but I don't know the inner workings of the story team in terms of when they have the full story written, what kind of revisions they get to do they have to edit themselves, or can they give it to someone else to just read over? But a very cursory read of this story, like a once-over read of this story would have gotten rid of, in my estimation, at least 90% of the mistakes, and that's a shame, as Amy said.
Yeah.
Because the author, which I did not mention, was Ari Levitch, and I appreciated the fact, because if I remember correctly, through looking at all of the things that Wizards of the Coast has been putting out there, Ari appreciated the fact that he feels like he was instrumental in bringing dwarves back to the game. There were a lot of dwarves mentioned in this story, and so if you know that about Ari, you know that that's something that he would probably be very happy to write about. And Depala, again, being a dwarf as well, she played a big part in this story, and I enjoyed her part in this story.
Yes.
But it would, because it was so bogged down, as Amy said, it's kind of a disservice to him, because it didn't shine through as much, because I was so caught up in the mistakes. And the mistakes took away from it, I should say. Because if I say I got caught up in it, then it's me. But it takes away from it because it's hard to fully know your full vision.
Yeah.
It's hard to see that. And so that's unfortunate. And so it's, in my estimation, it is never me. I'm never trying to bash an author of these stories. I'm never like, this guy sucked, because that is not the case. The moments that did not have spelling and grammar issues were fantastic. And in no way am I saying that I would hope that the other stories had gone through grammatical and spelling error checks through another person. Because again, spell check on a computer only goes so far,
right.
And you can misspell a word and it can just be another word that it won't pick up. That's just how spell check works, but it was unfortunate. And that's what I wanted to say. On that was kind of a big problem for me about the story. And that's not focusing on content whatsoever, because the content was fine. I had no big issues with the content. It was the way that it was presented that was troublesome to me. I don't know what else to say. It
was a cool story, sort of separately from the rest of them.
I didn't need it.
Yeah.
I didn't need it. I waited for a moment to think to myself, where is Jace here? Now, we will see next week, maybe in next week's story, it was super impactful. I liked the fact that Sky Sovereign's story arc was closed in that way. I liked that you got to see it get hit by the sky whale and start falling out of the sky.
Yeah.
And that was a cool way to kind of have Jace's plan not be the automatic destroyer of this thing. They let a tertiary character kind of take care of it on her own, basically, with her own thoughts and ideas, and not really on her own, because Depala flew it and Jace opened the cargo hold and dropped all that stuff out. But whatever, it was her idea from its inception, And it took out the gigantic thing that is the Sky Sovereign, and the Sky Whale flew by like he didn't even care. Or she, we don't know. But regardless, it flew by like it didn't even care. Yeah, it just knocked into Sky Sovereign, flew off, and Sky Sovereign just started falling out of the sky, which is awesome. That's that's cool. The art as well, in this, at least the new pieces of art, clearly the Sky Sovereign art is cool, but the new pieces of art that we saw here, there was one Skyship art, and there were a couple of different pieces of Kari Zev art, and a couple of different pieces of art either solely featuring Ragavan or with Ragavan in it. Those were really cool.
Even just the whale art was cool.
Yes, well, and again, most of the pieces of art in here are on cards from Aether Revolt, so I'm looking forward to opening it, like I said, and getting into that. But the art was great, and it was perfectly placed in the story at parts where it worked.
That's something
and was
we can
needed.
definitely say about this story.
Yes.
That was a positive.
Perfect placement.
Yeah.
And none of it was kind of thrown in where they were like, whatever, we haven't had a piece of art in a while here.
Or we have to include this, so let's fiddle with it until we can kind of stick it in there, even though it doesn't really belong.
Yeah.
There was none of that.
Yeah. It's interesting. We will see what next week's story is, because next week's story is the last story before the actual release of the set. This was the story before the pre-release, and this story in and of itself, if it was Burn, I'll keep going back to it, sorry. If it was Burn, I'd be much more hyped for the pre-release, just because I'd be like, oh my god, I gotta go play with this set, I gotta go talk to people. Now again, like I said, I don't know what next week's story is. Maybe next week's story is Story Spotlight number 4, and it's Battle at the Bridge, and we get to find out what happens there, and that seems like it would be epic. So maybe they're saving that one, and then I could understand that you didn't want to do Burn followed by Battle at the Bridge back to back.
Right.
So maybe that's the case, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that, but yeah, for right now, this story was okay. As we said it, I think, I don't know, Amy, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think it had its problems. As Amy said, she was not as harsh on it as I was. It was cool to see Kari Zev, cool to see Ragavan, cool to see T'Pala back, and cool to see Sky Sovereign's arc hopefully end, and its reign of terror, if you will, kind of come to a close. But I don't really have much else for this week.
Yeah.
What I will say is, I talked about it earlier, that as of the release of this video, tomorrow is pre-release, and by tomorrow I mean it's really midnight Saturday morning, but it's Saturday and Sunday is the pre-release. We're not sponsored by Wizards to say this, but if you get a chance, you should totally go out and play in a pre-release near you, support your local game stores, all that good stuff, but it's also just amazing to get to play with these cards. If you do not get a chance to play in the midnight pre-release, or whether you do or you don't, this channel will have, when we get our product at midnight, we will be opening it, we will be filming it, we will be sharing it with all of you, as we always do, or as we have done at least in the past couple of sets that we could. So you should definitely subscribe down below. You will see when those videos come out. You will find out when those videos come out. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you in advance if you do watch those pre-release videos. We hope that you guys are as excited as we are. Let us know if you are.
Hashtag Vorthos Pride, guys.
And show off your hashtag Vorthos Pride down in the comments below. As I said.
Or on Twitter or Facebook.
Yes, and the links to our Twitter and Facebook are down in the description box below, as always. As I said, thank you for watching from the Geek for All YouTube channel. I've been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.